We're taking all the best old school wisdom and blending it with the top new school methods to bring you the optimal coaching strategies. This is the 80-20 Baseball Podcast with Coach Bo.
Welcome to this week's episode, 80-20 Baseball. Community coaches, parents, players, welcome. Today, we are going to first discuss a mistake. I'm going to share with you a mistake I made early in my coaching career, and I fixed it, and it saved a lot of confusion. It saved me a lot of time during practice, and there was a lot more clarity, and it allowed me to be a much better coach during practice. I'm going to share that with you in just a second. Item 2, we're going to talk about technology that will not break the bank. Affordable technology for the typical youth baseball team. So we'll get into that. And that request came from one of you great listeners. You know who you are. Reached out this last week with a nice email. Between item 2, between part 2 and part 3, I'm going to share a quote by one of the greatest basketball coaches to ever coach college basketball. And while this coach is a Hall of Famer, very well known in the basketball community, may not be who you're thinking of that I'm going to bring up. And we'll get to that. Part 3, we're going to discuss what I brought up last week. Part 3 is going to be part 1 of a 3-part series that has specific tips and strategies embedded into it that are going to help us be better coaches by modeling specific behavior in a better way. And these are common mistakes that we make as coaches that we need to be careful not to make. And these are coaching items that if we are aware of and that we put some time into, not a lot of time, but focus and awareness into improving, they will have not just an effect on the scoreboard. We will win more games. You will win more games. Your team will have more success on the scoreboard, but more importantly, you will be producing, molding, shaping better young adults, better adults in the future with this younger generation. And you're going to lower your blood pressure on a couple of these too. So it's going to be a win-win, winner, chicken dinner. Quick review. Last week, we talked about the 80-20 principle and the listener demographics of this very podcast you're listening to right now. The 80-20 Baseball Podcast, the 80-20 principle showed up in the demographic breakdown. I said 80% of the listeners, of you listeners, are between the ages of about 33, 34, and 54, 55, which of course makes sense. And that's why I built this, was for you. So it doesn't surprise me. I'm glad that's how it is. Although there was like 14% of our under 32 or whatever it was as popped up. I don't dive into those so much. My focus is trying to put something out there that helps. Something that is not the same as everything else that's out there. There is other good stuff out there, and I'm not going to duplicate it and copy it here. I'm trying to bring something that's different, an efficient podcast that comes out once a week consistently for you to listen to have something to take out to the field, to build your confidence, to have more confidence, and to be better coaches with realistic tips, strategies that have been proven, that have shown themselves to work with many different teams at many different levels. But the 80-20 principle showing up in the demographic breakdown. Pretty cool. We made some bat recommendations last week. I shared out a couple bat recommendations. Those recommendations were by no means to be the end-all be-all of recommendations for bats, but I came to you with some good sources that I reached out to, some really good sources, and I shared them with you. And I shared an excerpt from the 3 Root Hitting Plans article, specifically the part about when the trout went fishing. So go back and listen to that if you haven't. Part 1 today, and mistake that I made early in my career. Not just early, probably for the first 7-8 years I coached, I would run and host bullpens. I would run bullpens, those sessions down. Of course, most of you know I'm talking about here, to just be clear, those sessions down in the bullpen area or even on the main diamond mound if the rest of the team wasn't there and we had access to it. But bullpens are essentially pitching practice sessions. What I learned has been super helpful since I started doing it, and that is to have the bullpen sessions scripted out on either a clipboard or a whiteboard. Now, there's an advantage to 2. The clipboard is a little harder to read, but I would have 2 clipboards or 3, depending on how many mounds we're going. We did talk about the accuracy drill a few weeks ago, scaling our drills. That's ideal, but it is almost impossible to scale pitching drills that use a mound. So it'd be great if there were 12 mounds to practice from and every kid could practice off a mound, but flat ground can be very effective, very efficient. That accuracy drill that I shared out, essentially all 12 players be pitchers and working on their accuracy and going through the delivery, stretch, and wind up, even working on their different pitches and locations. Scaling that up is great, but when you need to get the kids reps on an actual mound, which you do, one thing that I found very helpful was to have script out the bullpens the day before, the week before, or even the day of while you get a second on your lunch break or something. Have them scripted out, have a focus, a goal, mix it up a little. Down the road, currently I'm putting it together, but down the road it will be available, and I'll be sharing out with those of you that purchased it. It's going to be the templates that I use for running bullpens, and there's a breakdown of that. But the key, really the biggest key, is to start having your bullpens scripted either on clipboards. Just get 2 cheap clipboards or 3 cheap clipboards. They have the little hook on them. You hook them to the fence or just put them on the ground right behind the rubber, so long as the pitchers don't step on them, and you would have it scripted out. Now, there's an advantage to doing a clipboard versus a whiteboard, but there's also an advantage to having a whiteboard versus a clipboard. I prefer the clipboard because I'm a big fan of using the computer and having it done through a computer, and I can save each session. I can see the progress, I can adjust them, copy and paste, things like that. You can change how it's set up. You can move things around if you didn't like how it went. With a whiteboard, it's a lot harder, of course, to do that. So I do recommend a clipboard, and I recommend you having your bullpen sessions scripted out. Here's also another thing that helps. Not every pitcher is going to be doing the same bullpen session, the same volume, the same pitches. Now, they very well may be, but you might mix it up. I always mixed it up depending on the pitchers, depending on their recovery, depending on different things. So I actually would have bullpen papers for each pitcher. Some of them were duplicates, but they would have their name on them, the date, and it also allowed me to track volume a lot easier later on. I would put it on a spreadsheet, but you don't need to get into all that. This is the message. Print out 1, 2, 3, each pitch, 1 through 25, 1 through 30, 1 through 15, 1 through 40, whatever it is you're doing with your players, your pitchers that day in the bullpen. This is huge to do this. One, it takes away you having to be the person telling the pitcher what the next pitch is. One thing, it gives a little more autonomy. Of course, it's not total autonomy to the pitcher, but it gives more autonomy, a sense of more autonomy to the player. But it also allows you, the coach, to focus more of your energy on the delivery, on the key pitching items that you're working on, and not what pitch are they on or where are they at. Should they be in the stretch now? Should they be in the windup? What pitch is this? How many have they thrown? They track that. They being the kids, the pitchers, track that. A clipboard is very easy. You print out the paper and you bring it out and you just put it on the clipboard and hook it up to the fence. Or sometimes if the fence has that windscreen or something on it, you can just put it at the bottom. Make sure that the kids can read it from a certain distance. Sometimes I have to use 2 columns to get it all on the front page. You don't want to do the front and back. You don't want to flip it over. You should be able to get it all on the front. If you have to abbreviate. Trust kids can figure that out. And lastly, this forces us coaches to put thought into what pitches, the volume of pitches, the order of the pitches, the sequencing of pitches. Now, some of you might just be all fastballs. Okay, great. But for many of you, there's going to be some variety there. So I think having it scripted out is really good. If you're not doing changeups, and if it's just fastballs, you're not doing changeups, you're not doing breaking balls, if you're not doing stretch or wind up back and forth, mixing that up, then you could just tell them, hey, throw this many pitches, great, and go for it. Be sure to track the pitches, the volume. I think it's good to track that. But for everybody else, the clipboard, a couple different clipboards, 3 different clipboards, essentially 1 for each mound that you have in those bullpens. Most bullpens have 1, sometimes 2, typically not a third, but if you're lucky enough to have a third bullpen, there you go. This is what happens. You're going to have more time to spend your energy and focus on the delivery, working with the pitchers. Now, you shouldn't overcoach just because you have this freed up time now. Just because you've freed up some time doesn't mean you should overcoach, but it is definitely nice to not have to tell the players, the kids, all right, fastball now, or now we're working on changeup. Oh, yeah, hey, we're going to go from the stretch for the next 5. It's nice just to have it scripted out. It also makes us as coaches put forethought into the purpose of the bullpen session. And that starts with scripting it out in a way that's going to prepare the players optimally for the next game and for their future as a pitcher. I would build a template for this, and I would just repurpose that template, copy and paste, and just use that same template. You could even send it to the pitchers before and say, hey, this is what we're going to be doing tomorrow. I don't think you need to do that, but it is an idea and it is an option. Next week, I'm going to share with you another tip that has to do with game prep and pitching, and I'll share that with you next week. Now we're going to slide into part 2, cheaper or more affordable technology. Stopwatch, the phone that you have, a clipboard with some practice plans, using your computer or whatnot to make those practice plans. That's about all you need for the most part. I know they have some of these things like pocket radar things, but here's the thing. Technology is really great in a lot of ways to improve baseball players, but it's really squeezing out that last 5%, that last 1%. It's squeezing out, and when I say last 5 or percent or 1%, it's really squeezing out that extra little bit from the high level college and the professional professional players. You don't need and you don't have the time to really get into the technology to help your players get better. I absolutely don't think it's necessary for youth baseball and even high school baseball for the most part to use advanced technology. And what I mean by that, Rapsodo, TrackMan, Hawkeye. I am a huge fan of this technology. Huge fan. I love it. I'm fascinated by it. In fact, I recently went to a game with my dad, and it was a professional game here in Boise, the Hawks. Immediately when I get there, I start looking for things like that, and I look up behind and I see the TrackMan. You can see, if you know what a TrackMan looks like. Now, most of the teams have gone to Hawkeyes. Nevertheless, I pointed it out to my dad. I say, hey, you know what that does? It's measuring all the movements out here on the field and everything like that. I'm a big fan of it, big fan of tech. The thing I like technology for at the youth level is gamification. I'm a big fan of that for gamification, interest, pushing kids to compete. When I say gamification, I mean competition. It's basically gamification is competing via a technological platform. And I love that. I love it for that purpose, to infuse and to increase the competition. I like that. But is it needed? No. Can you create competition at practice without technology? Absolutely. With that said, every coach should have access to a stopwatch, and not necessarily the one on your phone. I would recommend you have one that's in your pocket or around your neck. I'm a big fan of having a cheap stopwatch because quickness, speed, time is, at the end of the day, that's really just a massive thing. You can get into things like launch angles and things like that, velocity, things that can't be measured with the stopwatch. But at the end of the day, playing fast, playing quick is something that can be measured on a stopwatch, and it's a great tool. In fact, I would never run a practice without using a stopwatch many a times to increase the productivity, to increase the pace of play, to challenge the players more, to keep them on task, or to clean up baseballs faster, whatever, water breaks. I am a huge fan of basic technology with a stopwatch, using a computer to have practice plans printed out. Huge fan of that, of course. And video with like an iPhone now, these iPhones for years, and Samsungs. I mean, some of these other phones have better cameras than the iPhone. The slow motion feature on these cameras is plenty for youth coaches to use and to draw from to help players out and to show them what they're doing. Another good way to do it, and I did this for years and years, an iPad that I can film the players and then show them right there in the bullpen, filming pitchers, filming hitters, and then showing the film on the iPad right then and there. At first, I probably showed too much film and, start overanalyzing it, but we got into a good groove where we used it when we needed it. When the kids asked for it, they could see it. Or if there was a glaring mistake they couldn't fix without technology, we didn't always default to technology like a video camera or a slow motion video. We didn't always default to that to fix the problem. But if they couldn't kinesthetically feel it, or the kinesthetic awareness was lagging or not there, we would show it to them and then go, hey, here's why. And it's also proof, like here, we're not just saying it, we're seeing it. Do you see it? Yeah, I see it, coach. Okay. So stopwatch, practice plans printed out, and a slow motion video camera, phone, tablet, iPad. That is the technology I truly think you need at the lower levels. Now, some of you might be saying right now, Coach Bo, we're going to get left in the dust. All these organizations that I see or I hear about in the other town or around us, they're using this advanced technology. They're using this advanced video stuff and all this really high-tech stuff. They're using Rapsodo. They're using TrackMan. They're using these high-tech Edutronic cameras and things like that. You don't need it. And I'm going to give you a perfect example, and it's not anecdotal by any means. It's not anecdotal. I'm going to give you a perfect piece of evidence that demonstrates why technology, to me, is overrated, getting players good at the youth level, really good at the youth level, good at the high school level, really good at the high school level, and even into college and beyond. The Dominican Republic. Okay, yeah, we're talking about the Dominican. I'm fascinated by that little island that produces so many darn amazing baseball players. In fact, the DR, the Dominican Republic, the DR has 11 million people on the island, plus or minus. I think like 11.5 million. 11 million people, and the US has approximately 335 million. So the DR, a small little island. In fact, it's not even its own island. I'm sure most of you know that the Dominican Republic literally shares an island with Haiti. It's not even a full island. It's like 18,000 square miles for the Dominican, 11,000 miles for Haiti. It's less than 2/3 of a small island. And the Dominican has 10% of Major League Baseball players, according to MajorLeagueBaseball.com, MLB.com. So the Dominican Republic has 11 million total people living on the island. The US has 335 million, and the US makes up 68% of the Major League Baseball players, and the Dominican Republic makes up 10%. So we'll do some quick math here. The Dominican Republic is approximately 30 times smaller than the US. And hold on, I am going to get into why technology plays into this. Some of you probably know exactly where I'm going with this already. The DR is 30 times smaller in terms of people than the US, 30 times smaller. Yet, it's only 7 times smaller in terms of players represented in the major leagues. The DR has one major league player. The Dominican Republic has one major league player for every 111,000 people. The US has one major league player for almost every 500,000 people. I'm a big fan of math. I don't rely always on the math because the math can be skewed. It can be used in manipulative ways, but the math on this is pretty clear cut. Dominicans are 5 times more likely to play in the major leagues than US players. 5, not quite, but almost 5x. Close to 5 times more likely that a Dominican kid that's born in Dominican is going to play in the major leagues than a US player. 5 times. And you're saying, well, Coach Bo, they got better, but they have better. No, they don't have better anything down there for the most part. Come on, let's be real. The US kids, we have access to so much more. I'm sure there's some I know there's nice facilities down there. I know the professional teams have put nice facilities down there, but overall, the US, why is it the Dominican players, kids are 5 times more likely to make it to the major leagues than a US kid? They probably have less than 5 times the stuff. They probably have like 100 times less access to things, good stuff, batting cages, facilities, the nicest gear, the nicest cleats, the nicest they don't talk about doctors and things just all down the road, trainers, workout gyms. All right, I could go on about that. And I'm not trying to defend either one or say this, that, and the other, but they're obviously doing something down there in Dominican that is working better. And I think there's definitely one part of it is that the players in the Dominican that come from the Dominican that are the young kids there, it's a much bigger deal for them to make it out and to raise up the quality of life. It's much bigger and more important for them, of course, right? Overall, because the trade-off is much tougher. It's a much tougher situation than a kid in the United States almost always has a better fallback plan, right? But with that said, you can't tell me their technology's better down there. No way. The youth baseball, high school baseball has better technology in the Dominican. In fact, they probably don't use very much. In fact, I'm not very sure they use anything close to what our kids are getting exposed to in some of the more affluent areas, at least at a young age, like the 10-year-old and the 12U. Kind of to wrap that point up was you don't need great technology to produce great players. And I know as a youth player, as a youth coach, our end goal is not to be a major league player necessarily. It's to be a really good baseball player, optimize our talents, our skills, to go as far as we can with the game. As a coach, we want to use baseball as a vehicle to produce and build and to help nourish better human beings through the game of baseball, which has failure, it has teamwork. It's a microcosm of real life, and it's a great way to do it in a fun way, in the America's pastime type of way, in a gamified way. But it is interesting that when a country like the DR, which is much poorer and has much less access to technology, is 5 times more likely to produce baseball players than the US. I truly believe some of it is a hunger, need, a necessity to get to a higher level to, provide for the family. It's more important. But surely the technology is not helping the Dominican Republic players, but yet they're almost 5 times more likely to go to the major leagues. So when you're looking at technology or you're looking at other places or other leagues or other teams or other communities or other programs that have great technology, don't worry. You don't need that to be as good or better than them. You don't. Now, if somebody wants to donate it to you and just write a big check and just donate $100,000 or $10,000 worth of stuff, hey, take it. But that is obviously super, super rare and probably not going to happen to any of us. With that said, a stopwatch, a computer to write some practice plans, a clipboard, and an iPhone or a phone of any sort will do in terms of technology. Radar, the Pocket Radar seems pretty cheap. I haven't used the Pocket Radar. I own a Stalker 2. The Pocket Radar things have come on the scene and some of these others have come on the scenes. A lot of people like them. I haven't used one. I haven't needed one because I already have one. But measuring speed off the bat, I think would be fun to gamify. I think just bats, exit velocity would be fun. And again, the exit velocity is definitely not the end all be all, because if you don't make contact, if you don't have a good approach, it doesn't matter how hard you're hitting the ball in practice, right? You still got to hit in the game. You still got to hit the all fields. You still got to hit off speed pitches, and hitting a batting practice ball super hard doesn't necessarily translate over to a game. Let's switch over here to the quote of the week. The quote of the week. I want to start throwing a quote of the week, and I've done quotes before. I want to start throwing one in every week. Quote: most people get excited about games. Most coaches get excited about games, but I've got to be excited about practice because that's my classroom. End quote. Pat Summitt, basketball coach, University of Tennessee, since retired. Pat Summitt, the great women's basketball coach. Pat Summitt said, hey, most people, and what she means, most coaches get excited about games, but I've got to get excited about practice because that's my classroom. So true indeed. You have to be excited about practice. You have to look forward to going to practice. As a coach, practice should be much more fun than a game for a coach. I truly believe, and I'm a big fan of seeing that excitement that comes naturally and organically because you're excited to get to practice because practice is your classroom. That's where you can be the painter on the canvas. That's where you can make the big influence. The game is when the other team and the situation, the environment helps players. The repetitions in a game action or a game environment help players improve and get better or get exploited, one or the other. But in the practice environment, that's the coach's canvas. So Pat Summit, I love that. Most coaches get excited about games, but I've got to be excited about practice because that's my classroom. So be excited about going to practice as a coach. And when you really truly buy into being a coach and really truly buy into the role of being a coach, you're going to, and most of you already probably feel this, you're going to feel that excitement when you're headed to practice. I know I have. Didn't always feel it right away early on, first couple years of coaching, but definitely something that hit me pretty quick and was like, yes, I should feel more excitement about practice than the games. Don't get me wrong. I'm excited to go to games. I like games, but it was a different, more energetic, a more uplifting energy in terms of being able to make a difference. It was like an impactful type of energy. Like I was energetic and excited because I felt like there was much more impact made during practice. And there's some adages like practice is about the coaches and the players. Practice is a lot more about the coaches and the games is a lot less about the coaches. And I think that's absolutely true. Practice should be a lot about the coach working with the players, building this environment. In the games, the coach doesn't necessarily get to build up the environment, doesn't get to set up the environment, the drills, the challenges. It's inherent into the game and how it plays out with the game and the opponent and vice versa. All right, part 3. Now, part 3 is part 1 of a 3-part series that starts this week. We'll go next week and the week after. The no excuse culture. We're going to discuss how no excuses and not making excuses is part of the culture, not just something we tell players not to do. Don't make excuses, kids. Hey, kids, we're not going to make excuses. It's part of the culture. So part 1, we're going to talk about the no excuse culture and how this is huge when it comes to winning more games, developing better kids, better adults through the vehicle of baseball, youth sports. Next week, we're going to talk about a second topic that's different. And the third week, we're going to talk about a third topic. And these all involve creating a better culture and more specifically, what we talk about and what we don't talk about with our players and how much we talk about it and how little we talk about it, how much we emphasize these things and how much we de-emphasize these topics. This week is the no excuse culture. If we make comments to our players, around our players that are connected in some way to making excuses, then we are indirectly giving the green light to our players that it's okay to do just that. We as coaches can't tell our players, we cannot tell our players, hey, we're not going to make excuses. We don't make excuses. And then ourselves as coaches, we are making excuses. And the challenge here is the awareness that we are doing this. The awareness. I've been around so many coaches that I've heard make excuses, whether it was post-game interviews or just right there in the team talk, post-game talk or the post-practice talk or whatever. I've seen so many coaches subtly and unknowingly send the message of, hey, it's okay to make excuses because they themselves just made an excuse about something. It could have been a subtle excuse. It could have been something mild. But when we as coaches make anything that resembles an excuse around our players, and for that matter, around the other coaches too, or the parents, we are then indirectly giving a massively bright green light to our players that it's okay to do just that. We have to make sure that we de-emphasize excuses and we role model that ourselves. Making excuses, we're not blaming the field conditions. We're not blaming the lighting. We're not blaming things. We're not blaming the umpires. We're not making excuses because of the strike zone. We're not making excuses because the other team has kids who look like those old Chinese Taipei kids back in the early 90s Little League World Series. We're not making excuses because their team looks like they're 15U playing 12U. We're not making excuses. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't go check those IDs after. What I'm saying is we're not making excuses to our players. We do not want our kids to grow up and be excuse makers because that will stunt their growth, their productivity, their improvement so much. Yet it's so easy to make excuses. It's hard for us to allow kids to make excuses, but it's easy for us to fall into the trap of ourselves making excuses. I think it's just human nature, right? I'm not a psychologist, but I feel like making excuses is like kind of the default for most human beings. beings, right? It's kind of a natural reaction to pass off the blame, pass the buck off. I get it. It's just, well, I think we're all somewhat wired, some more than others, but I just think it's important that we're aware that we're doing this, and that it's very important that we are very careful not to do this around our players and even parents. A lot of parents are going to wait for the coach to say something, or if they hear the coach make an excuse, it solidifies their need or want to make excuses for their kid and tell little junior at home at the dinner table that it was the ump's fault, it was the other team's fault, it was somebody else's fault on the team, it was the field's fault, it was the weather's fault. And some of those may absolutely be valid. I'm not saying that they're not valid things or they weren't things that didn't actually happen. What I'm saying is it will hurt your team much more than it will ever help your team. If you have an issue with the umpire, you politely and quietly handle that as adults. You don't bring the kids into it. If you have a problem with the field not being safe or not playable, then you deal with the league, the umpire, but you don't bring the kids into it. That's not to say that kids shouldn't give you feedback on certain things. They might share with you, there's a problem here or a problem there, and you listen to that, you respect that. And if you need to act upon that, act upon it. But the excuse culture starts with the coaches and what the coaches do and allow. And I would be very careful around parents to make excuses, because a lot of parents will run with it. And they don't mean to do bad with it, but they'll run with that. And at the dinner table with little junior, they're going to be blaming everything else except focusing within on the things that we can control and get better at. If it's something somebody else does or something outside of ourselves that we can influence or respond to or help correct or address, then that's one thing. But do it outside of the earshot of players and even parents. If you want to vent with somebody, maybe the assistant coaches, you can vent a little bit. Some players I just don't even think it's a good paradigm to have, a good mindset to have. A lot of young coaches and a lot of youth coaches, because they don't coach long enough to realize that there's always going to be something you could blame, and there's always a scapegoat for everything in sports. You could always say it's this or that. You could always probably make an excuse, and in some cases a somewhat valid reason that you're saying is the things didn't go the way maybe they should have gone. But and injuries is another one. Injuries is a big one. No injury excuses. You don't make excuses for injuries. You don't make excuses. Umpires, the field conditions, the weather, the sun being in somebody's eye. So this part one of this 3-part series is the mindset and the awareness and how we talk as coaches. I'm telling you, don't get into the mode of making excuses. I'm not saying you're not going to have those thoughts. What I'm saying is just don't turn those thoughts in your head into words. Just keep them to yourself. And what eventually you'll start to do, I truly believe, is you'll start to look at things as, hey, you know what goes around comes around. Bad calls will typically go around, come around. If you do not want your kids to have the victim mindset, the victim mindset is destroying so many kids these days and their mindsets. It's really hard to overcome the feeling, the sense that we're victims. And I know you all agree with this. It's just really hard to flourish, to thrive, to move forward, to progress, to improve in life when we have a sense, and in some cases a strong sense, of being a victim. And if you're making excuses, that is tied directly with you were a victim of this. Now, the word, we might use different words, different synonyms for this, but you have that sense of if you're blaming somebody else and you say you're a victim because of their mistake or this, or we're a victim of a bad call. So let's be careful as coaches. Don't make any excuses. Bite your tongue. Keep it to yourself. Join a men's club where you can vent about the terrible umpires and field conditions and how things didn't bounce your way out there on the field. But do not bring it up with your players. Not at all. I'm just saying, do not bring it up in the form of an excuse. Can you address something? Yeah. So some of you might have been waiting for me to throw this piece out there. Can you address something that went against you that probably wasn't fair or wasn't accurate, but it went against you? Yeah. But I would just be very clear that I would address it and say, hey, that's how it works. It is what it is. We're going to get our bounces. They got whatever. You just need to be very careful with this, because if you have the mindset, I promise you, if you have a mindset of going out there and not focusing on making excuses, not focusing on how the things went against you, how you're a victim as a coach, how your team got victimized by bad calls, bad bounces, yada, 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 you will focus on the things that will, in the long run, make your kids so much better of human beings. You'll win more games. You'll score more runs. You'll give up fewer runs. Everything will be a lot better. And also, you as a coach and your players will have a lot less stress, a lot lower stress levels in your lives. All right. I love being here. I love being here with all of you. It's awesome to see the numbers just continuing to grow and grow. You know, we're coming back each week, quality episode with usable, actionable stuff that you can take out that will work. Next week, next Tuesday, when the next episode comes out, we're going to talk about two things. One, some game prep. I'm going to give you a tip about game prep. It's going to be tied in with the bullpens. We're going to talk about that next week. And also part 2 of our 3-part series here. When I say this 3-part series is around kind of our verbiage, our talking, our wordage to players. Part 2, I'm going to share a strategy, a tip that's going to help you win more games. It's going to help you mold better human beings, just like today's topic, this no excuse mindset, no excuse dialogue with our players. So this topic for next week, it'll talk about something that's going to help you mold better human beings, lower your stress levels, and literally you'll be adding runs to the scoreboard, better adults of the world down the road, and lowering your blood pressure all at the same time. I'm going to share this tip, this strategy about how doing less or saying less is actually going to do a whole lot more for you and all your players. So check in next week when the next episode comes out. And you know how we like to wrap up these podcasts. I think it's important to have this mindset and hear this affirmation every week of let's take care of our health. Let's try to be better with our health. We don't need to be perfect. We do not need to be perfect. But as coaches, if we have better health, not perfect health, but better health, we're going to have more energy. We're going to have more positivity. It's going to be a heck of a lot easier to be a better coach out there, because being a good coach is a lot of work. But if you have a better foundation, it's going to be a lot easier. So take care of your health so you can also take care of your family and also your close friends. Make the baseball community a better place. You already are by showing up here and learning this. Now take it out there, put it into action, take it out there, share it with your players, put it into your practices, put it into your training routines. And until next week, adios.
This has been the 80-20 Baseball Masterclass. Take it to the field.